Building a comfortable sewing space does take quite a bit of time, especially if you have limited space where every new item has to be well thought through. In this video, I want to share a few improvements that I added to my sewing space, which massively increased sewing comfort. I will start with the biggest game changer, and it was adding a foldable cutting table. Now, this point needs a little bit of a backstory. So on January 1st, I woke up with massive back pain. Now, having back pain is no news for me, unfortunately, but up until this point, it was never so severe because this time I couldn't get out of bed. This was my wake-up call, which showed me that I needed to make some changes in order to avoid this happening again in the future. If you ever had back pain issues, you know that it's a complex issue that needs lots of different solutions to solve it fully. So I started working out more intensively with weights to increase my muscle mass. I started consuming more protein, again to improve muscle mass. I retired all of my high heels in the back of the closet and switched to low flat shoes. And I also needed to make changes in my sewing space because for the very long time I was cutting fabrics on the floor, and while it was not the main cause of my back pain, it was definitely something that did trigger back pain episodes. The solution was very obvious, that I needed to add a cutting table to my sewing space. But because my sewing space is very small, it's actually just part of our bedroom, I needed a solution that would work specifically for my space. And this is where I came up with a very genius idea, is to use a mini table tennis table as my foldable cutting table. Now, the table that I have is from Decathlon and it's about 60 euros. While it's not super big, it's large enough for me to cut comfortably pieces like pants or full-length dress. It's also surprisingly quite sturdy. This is why I don't have much issues when I need to work on this surface. But the biggest reason why I love this table so much is that it has foldable legs. So when I don't need to use the table, I can fold it and slip it under our bed or put away in the closet. Having a dedicated cutting table has been such a massive game changer in my sewing space because finally I was able to get a large cutting mat and try cutting fabrics with rotary cutter. I can very comfortably lay out all of my pattern pieces on the table without any of it wrinkling. It's very comfortable for base stitching and it just massively improved my sewing comfort. But most importantly, I no longer have to cut on the floor, and it has been such a massive improvement towards solving my back pain issues. Is it an ideal cutting table? No, but it's an ideal solution in my current sewing space. Another game-changing sewing setup solution that you can easily implement in any sewing space that you have is using L-shape, U-shape, or O-shape setup, which will allow you to seamlessly switch between different sewing tasks. So of course, the most popular setup is the L shape, where you have a sewing table, you put the ironing board at the angle of the sewing table, and you can switch from sewing the seam to pressing the seam to again sewing on your sewing machine without having to move from the chair. Now that I have the cutting table, I am able to form the U shape. So here is the table, then I add the ironing board, and then I have the cutting table where I can place all of my other pattern pieces that I currently don't need, or if I need to base stitch, I can do it right here on the table, then go to the sewing machine, then to the ironing board, and continue repeating this without ever having to leave my chair. And on the projects that require both sewing machine and a serger, I will use these retractable drawers from my desk to place the serger on top and create the perfect O shape, allowing me to work on my project without ever having to move from a chair. Using one of these setups has massively changed how comfortable and how efficiently I can complete the project. This is why I definitely recommend giving this a try. Before we move on with discussing different sewing setups, I wanted to invite you to join my email newsletter community. Every month I answer your sewing questions and answers in the monthly newsletter. I'm also currently working on a few courses that will include both pattern making and sewing using professional techniques. So join the email community to get notified when the courses launch. Now let's continue with our list. Now, third improvement that I added to my sewing space is thread storage. Now, as sewists, we have threads, and if you've been sewing for a long time, most likely you have lots of threads. For storing large thread cones, I have a drawer which is perfect size for thread cones. However, for those small spools, I didn't have a right solution and I would just keep everything in the box. Now, having all those spools in the box wasn't very comfortable because threads often would get tangled, and if I would need to find a specific thread, I would have to dig through the entire box, and very often I would end up buying very similar thread to what I already had. I wasn't just able to find it. So as a gift for myself for my birthday this year, I decided to upgrade my sewing thread storage and bought special boxes. Now, my main requirement for the thread storage was that the threads would be placed horizontally instead of the more popular vertical storage solution. When the threads are stored horizontally, I can just take a look at the box and see all the colors at once, versus if they would be stored vertically, I wouldn't be able to see all of my threads at once as well. So the box that I bought has 46 compartments, and each compartment fits 4 regular size spools, meaning that I can fit total of 184 spools in one box, which is really a lot. I bought 2 cases, and in one I keep all of my regular sewing threads, all-purpose polyester threads and cotton threads. And in the second case, I use my special threads from one side, and on the other side I keep all of my embroidery threads. I sorted my threads by color and shade to make it easier to find the right color when needed. Neatly storing my threads has been such a massive game changer, and honestly it's just very nice to see all of my threads so neatly placed inside the boxes. Fourth solution that I added in my sewing space is getting a mini vacuum cleaner. Now, this is something that I've been thinking about for quite a long time. Now, because my sewing space is part of a bedroom, I need to keep it very clean. This is why I have a trash can underneath my sewing table. This is why I always keep a cup next to my sewing machine when I'm sewing so that I can put loose thread ends there. This is why I pay so much attention to having right storage solutions so that everything looks neat and clean. But even with all of those efforts, it does get a little bit messy sometimes. This is why I decided to get a mini vacuum cleaner and keep it in my sewing space so that I can use it whenever I need it. Now, I went for this specific vacuum cleaner because it's quite small and portable, so I don't have to plug it in. I can just grab it and start using it. It also came with several different nozzles, meaning that I can use bigger ones to vacuum the floors or larger surfaces, and I can use very narrow ones for more delicate tasks like cleaning my serger. It is also very powerful, and the suction power is very strong, so it's not a gimmicky product. It's an actual vacuum cleaner, just really tiny. Having a vacuum cleaner in your sewing space is not necessary, but if you are thinking about how to easily improve the tidiness of your space, this is definitely something worth considering, especially because the price wasn't that high. And the final 5th improvement that I added to my sewing space and absolutely love is my desk lamp. Now, if you watch my earlier videos, you know that I do love my big lamp, and it's #1 thing I get asked about. I've been using this lamp for 4, maybe 5 years, and it's honestly perfect solution for my sewing space. It's big, it's bright, it's about 2200 lumens. It attaches to the desk with a clamp so it doesn't slide off whenever I'm sewing. It has adjustable height, and it's also dimmable. My sewing area is not perfectly lit, and here in Lithuania we don't get that many sunny days, so I end up using my big bright light every time that I'm sewing. It is a bit of an investment, but for me personally it was worth making because I use it all the time and it makes my sewing space extremely well lit. So here are all 5 things that make my sewing space so much better. I will link all items discussed in the video in the description box down below, and I'll also add a link to join my email newsletter community. Thank you for watching today, and I will see you next time. Bye!